Good evening and welcome to Netzach Yisrael's daily Kitzur Shulchan Aruch share. Tonight we're going to be finishing off Siman Chaf Gimel, Siman 23, the laws of the reading from the Holy Scroll. So we start with Seif Chaf Gimel 23. If for one of the aliyahs, i.e. the times that they call someone up to read from the Torah, they only read 2 psukim when really you meant to read at least 3, and then the person made the blessing that one is meant to say after having done that reading, because what we normally do is we have a blessing beforehand, and then what used to happen is the person that was called up would read, but nowadays we change, and there is someone who reads the entire thing for you, and then the person who was called up makes a blessing afterwards. So two verses, and then made the blessing afterwards. Then you need to go back and reread the bit that you read. And you need to make blessings both before and afterwards. And because after one made the blessing after the reading, then it is considered as though one has kind of removed it from one's mind and moved on to something else. And then one needs to begin right from the beginning of the blessings, which is when they say Baruch Hu, as in blessed be he, and everyone else answers. And then you read the 2 verses that were read last time, and a 3rd verse with it, to get your minimum of 3 verses. And if this was the 3rd person that was called to the Torah, only read 2. And the first 2 people that were called only read 3 verses each. I.e., therefore, this 3rd person, really actually needs to read 4. Therefore, because therefore you need to read 2 extra verses, not just 1. So that there should be altogether 4 verses, i.e., because the minimum total reading is 10, 3, and then 4. Obviously, that's the minimum. Obviously, there can be more. And if this happened that only 2 verses were read with the aliyah that the priests get, which is normally the first aliyah, or calling up, they only read 2 verses, and they've already gone and called up the Levites, who gets the 2nd aliyah, and then you remember that for the priest you only read 2 verses. Then the law is thus. So if the Levite has not yet made the first blessings, and even if he's begun the kind of introduction Baruch Hu bit, that is not the beginning of the blessing, and therefore the priest should go back and read the 2 verses that were before, plus another verse, and make the blessings before and afterwards, as we have just said. And the Levite should wait and then read what he was meant to have afterwards in the normal way. However, if the Levite has already made a blessing, then with the Levite you read from the place where the priest stopped reading. Why do we do that? Why do we not go back? We do not go back because if the Levite goes and rereads what the priest read, there will be a kind of to the detriment of the priests that are currently there in the synagogue. Because they will say that the Levites began to read from the Torah, which is really the priest's job, and therefore obviously this so they, the priests aren't proper priests or something, or he will say things to that effect, and obviously to avoid that, therefore the Levite will just continue and not start again. And the Levite obviously will read the 3 verses. And after the Levite, you call up 2 Israelites. That therefore there should be 3 people being called up, getting the correct number of verses. And the priest is not counted from the number, because he only read 2 verses. And if this happened when the Levites calling up, so the priest read 3, now the Levites only read 2. They only read 2 verses. And the Israelite has already made his blessing, because that's when things get a little bit more sticky. So therefore, then the Israelites actually this time does go back over what the Levites read, and it says those 2 verses plus another one. And then you call up a second Israelite to make up to have 3 people being called up with the correct number of verses. And if there was no priest in the synagogue, and therefore the entire order of priests, Levite, Israelites goes out the window, and you just call up whoever to start off with, and you called up an Israelite, or the law would be the same for a Levite. And therefore it happened that with the Israelite, you only read 2 verses. And you did not realize until after you'd called up the second Israelite and he had made the blessings. Then the second Israelites can start reading again from the beginning of the portion. And the first Israelite should wait, and then actually get the second calling up after this one. And then you should call up a third Israelite to 3. Seif Chafdalet. A minor, one under 13 years of age, should not be the one reading from the Torah, and also should not be called up to make the blessings on the Torah. Seif Chafhei. After the reading of the Torah, then one says the half Kaddish, and then one raises the Torah scroll so that everyone can see it. The one who lifts it should open up the scroll enough so that 3 columns of writing are visible. And he should show it to his right, to his left, in front of him and behind him, i.e. do a full 360. Because there is a commandment on all men to see the actual writing. And all of the men, all the people in the synagogue should say the verse of Torah. This is the law that is found in the prayer books. And then you roll up the scroll. And it is a positive commandment to try and roll it. That the seam between the 2 pieces of parchment should be in between the 2 pillars of the scroll. And and one should roll it until the place where you started from should be in the middle. If the seam before the point where you are at is the one closest to it, then one should roll it to that seam. And if the seam that is after the point where you're up to is the one closer, then one should also roll to there. Because a little bit of more rolling is better, because of the honor of the Torah scroll. And I'm not sure for all of the reasons for this, but one of the reasons I do know is because when one lifts it up, if it falls or it begins to split, what you make sure you have the seam in between the two pillars, so that it provides to where that it can split along without having to without putting on the parchment and possibly tearing words. Siv Chavov. Every single time one reads from the Bible, from the Torah, after this one says after it the half Kaddish, except for the Mincha b'Shabbos, from Mincha on the Sabbath, from the afternoon prayers, or Mincha b'Sanis, and the afternoon prayers on a fast day. Because we rely on the Kaddish that we say before we say the silent Amida, the silent Shemana Esra, which is said immediately after the reading from the Torah. Siv Chav Zayin. B'Sheni u'B'Chamishi, on the Monday and Thursday, the leader of the congregation, it says after the lifting of the Torah, a series of prayers, all beginning, Yehi Ratzon, may it be His will. Amen. And the congregation needs to hear the privileged prayers and answer Amen. However, when in the synagogue we do not say the supplication for forgiveness, then one does not say the series of Yehi Ratzon prayers. After this, one returns the Torah scroll to the Holy Ark. And it is a good deed for every person that the Torah scroll should pass before them. And similarly, the one who raises the Torah scroll and the one who rolls the Torah scroll, that they should accompany the Torah scroll until it reaches the Ark. Excuse me. In a place where there is no Torah scroll, one person should read from a chumash, i.e. another kind of holy book containing the Torah that does not count as an actual Torah scroll, in a loud voice. And the congregation should listen, in order that the laws of the reading from the Torah scroll should not be forgotten. 10 people that are davening together, that are praying together, and they do not have a Torah scroll to read from. One does not bring to them a Torah scroll specifically for the purposes of reading. Even if they are locked up in prison. Just a note, the Mishnah Berurah argues with this and says if there are 10 people locked up in prison, then, or 10 ill people, then there are leniencies. Even on the holy, the day of the New Year, or the Day of Atonement, the holiest days of the year, one still does not do it because it's not seen as befitting as part of the Torah scroll. But if one can bring it 1 or 2 days beforehand, or an ark, or a table, or a box, then one can make a permanent place for the Torah scroll, which is therefore more honorable, more befitting for the Torah scroll. Most of them it is allowed to bring one specifically for this reading because it has a permanent place, and it's therefore it's more befitting the honor of the Torah scroll. And for the need of an important person, for who is also ill, then it is permitted to bring the Torah scroll purely for the reading. Someone says that for an important person, even if this person is not ill, and even for an ill person who is not an important person, then in those 2 cases it is also still permitted to bring a Torah scroll purely for the purposes of reading, even if you do not kind of designate a specific place. And And there are those who are lenient on the Sabbath for when we read the portion of remembering what Amalek did, and also for the portion of the red heifer. Right, because there are those who hold that those readings are the only readings that are obligated to you by Torah law, by kind of biblical law, which puts them on a higher level than the rest of the readings, which are rabbinical. And therefore, for those ones, we're lenient, and even if there's no kind of place to place the Sefer Torah, the Torah scroll, even so, we still bring one for the reading because it is of a greater importance. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good evening.